Rod Stewart, thanks for the memory. Global March for Lions will be held in 50 cities throughout the world on the 15th of March to demonstrate against the abhorrent practice of canned hunting. Now, thanks to organiser Donalea Patman, president of For Love of Wildlife, Melburnians will have an opportunity to march in protest at the vile practice next Saturday. Welcome to the programme, Donalea, and thanks for your time.
Good morning, John. How are you?
I'm very well. I understand you're at work at the moment, so I hope you're secreted in the toilet somewhere so we can get a nice private conversation.
That's right. I'm out in the car.
Oh, yeah. Now, I understand the Global March for Lions in Melbourne will begin from the steps of State Parliament at 12 noon and end at City Square, corner of Swanson Collins Street next Saturday. Now, will you be walking via Collins Street?
Yes, that's the plan. Our map is up on our Facebook page, Global March for Lions-Melbourne. All the information will be kept up to date, and if you register as attending, all of that notification will come through.
Oh, we're getting a different tonality there. It's as though you were speaking through a tube and then suddenly you came out into the open. Did you pull the windows up or something? The tonality changed. You went from sort of suppressed to suddenly open. Now, listeners who might be unfamiliar with the term canned hunting, tell us what it means, will you?
Canned hunting is where the target animal is unfairly prevented from escaping the hunter. And in this case, these lions, particularly lions, are bred specifically for hunting and normally put in an area the size of a tennis court, often drugged, and during their life cycle basically endure hideous conditions.
So I guess the guys shoot from outside the tennis court, or do they actually brave enough to go inside the tennis court and shoot them?
Well, it's a combination of things depending on how much they pay. The lions are mostly habituated. They're raised by humans or unsuspecting volunteers, thinking that they're doing volunteer work for a conservation group. So they're bottle-fed, they're patted, they're walked until they're of an age where they start becoming a little difficult, and then they're put back in a cage until they're about 4 years old, and that's when hunters can go and shoot them. So
they're more likely to lick you to death than bite you from the sound of it then. They're not exactly going in there facing danger, are they?
No. And when it is a bigger area than, say, a tennis court, and some of this hunting does happen outside the fenced area, the guys who go out in the Jeep, the lions normally come up to the Jeep. That's how friendly they are. If you start looking on the internet as to how to buy the rights to shoot any animal, there are many, many gun lobbyists, and many of them from the US. There are also reserves in Africa that will send you a menu of animals that are available to shoot, ranging from a couple of $100 and as much as $350,000, which was a recent sale for a rhino that apparently is old and grumpy, and yet there's evidence that that's not the case. So animals across Africa are under siege, either through the market in Asia with fake medicinal qualities, and lion bone is an upcoming industry, through bushmeat. Exotic meats are now wanted through restaurants around the world. And when you consider that chimpanzees carry the same diseases as humans, like HIV, I certainly would not be eating chimp. So there's just enormous pressure on Africa. Wildlife is an area where they make an enormous amount of money. There's also input and influence from terrorist groups. Rhino horn is exorbitantly expensive at the moment, and rhinos will be extinct very soon.
In looking at the film that you've got, Donalea, it shows that these guys are not clean shots either. They don't take the lion out in one clean shot. They seem to have to shoot it a number of times, and the poor animal is jumping around all through that process, which is very distressing.
It's just cruel. There's no part of this practice that's actually got, firstly, any conservation value, and secondly, it's a hideous thing to watch. These people, I believe, are pretend hunters. I actually think they're very wounded human beings that get a thrill out of having power over something that has no capacity to fight back.
I remember movies when I was a kid, going a long way back, I might tell you, where you'd see Tarzan and then the lion would just about jump on Tarzan and suddenly be shot. And the trophy idea was almost related to, your position in society. And somehow these characters still live in that dreadful past, I think. What do you think?
The understanding of the psyche is, I really don't get it, and most people don't. Australians don't have a culture of hunting like the US. And anybody who speaks or finds out about canned hunting are naturally appalled.
With the baby cubs too, Donalea, I believe that a lion normally has a litter of cubs every 3 years. But what happens in the canned hunting facilities when they take the cubs away from the mother pretty well straight after birth?
Yeah, well, that puts an enormous amount of pressure on the lioness. It forces her back into estrus, and so she can then be basically fertile, artificially inseminated, or usually it's within the same camp, so there's a lot of inbreeding, there's a lot of deformed cubs. A lot of them are just sort of thrown out like trash because they've got no value. Nobody's going to want a trophy that's got little legs or a deformity, so it's a byproduct of the hideous nature of this industry.
Goodness me.
Now, tell us about cub petting. That's another thing that perhaps needs clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, and I know from the Australian perspective, many Australian volunteers are going to Africa, volunteering their time, believing that they're supporting conservation. What's happening is there's a big spin that these guys are promoting that if you come and volunteer, and it's never just volunteering, you pay to volunteer at these camps. You spend your time raising cubs thinking that they're going to be reintroduced to the wild. Now, because of the inbreeding and the genetic issues, they're never going to be reintroduced. So we have a huge force of volunteers from Australia that are being conned and ripped off. So that's one of the projects for the Love of Wildlife, is to actually educate travel agents and volunteer groups, because they're all believing that what they're doing is ethical and eco-travel, and it's actually not.
Does that mean that they raise those cubs by bottle feeding them and doing all that sort of thing? Is that what they're doing?
Absolutely. The cycle is the cubs are taken off the mother about 2 days, then sent out to these petting places. They hold cubs, they bottle feed them, they raise them, only for them to go back into the cages and wait for their day where they're bought on the internet, and the hunters fly in, shoot the animal, it's then dealt with, and they fly home with their trophy.
What steps, if any, does the South African government take in bringing a halt to this abhorrent industry?
Well, there's kind of some outlines, I think, of the way the industry is perceived to be governed, but the South African government's just under too much pressure from a humanitarian side, and there's really very little controls or regulation in place to really go around and make sure that these guys are abiding by the law. But even so, trafficking wildlife in any form is not okay. And this global march for lions across the world, with more than 55 cities on board now, is to put pressure on the South African government to say we want it totally banned.
I was reading a little bit of background there about safari clubs where tens of thousands of hunters and hunting operators gather every year to buy and sell hunts. For a illuminating description of how this event functions, for example, it gives out prizes for bizarre actions, all totally contrary to conservation. The person who's killed the highest number of animals anywhere gets a prize. So does the hunter who's killed the highest number of endangered species. I understand that this mob is a threat to wildlife because its members have amongst them trophy hunting multinational conglomerate characters. They have former leaders of the country, former presidents, and they have a mentality that equates roughly to the Tea Party. That sounds pretty right, I think. One of them, I read, has paid something like $25 million to get these carcasses brought across against US regulations that's supposed to pertain to health, under some guise of when you dig bones out of the ground, that
yes,
type of thing.
archaeological
clause. So it's a dreadful industry, isn't it?
It's abhorrent, and we also have to be careful because we've got our own Guns and Fishers Party. Robert Borsak is always pushing for legislation to open our national parks to hunting. He also has about 60 trophies on his wall. So while we look seriously at the US and their abhorrent behaviour, we do have our own within the Australian culture that needs to be regulated and watched as well.
I saw an article yesterday that Viv showed me that it was a very large cage, and on top of it was a lion, and inside it were all these people who were hunters, and you know, who's going to enjoy. I mean, it was a lovely picture. You can imagine the lion sort of jumping in and saying, "Nah, see how you go."
I always like the idea of rounding up all these poachers, trophy hunters, etc., and stripping them of everything, leaving them nude in the middle of Kruger and saying, right, now get out, and let's just see how that game goes.
Yeah.
I like the little caption there on that particular cartoon that you were talking about, Johnny, that said, "And for no extra cost, we can have you stuffed and mounted."
Well, getting back to the serious side of this, clearly this is a toxic and cruel industry, and it has to be closed down. And just a reminder for you on your behalf that the Global March for Lions will take place at noon next Saturday, 15th of March, beginning from the steps of Parliament at 12 noon and ending at City Square at, I guess, sometimes like 20 minutes later, perhaps it would be.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, you've already told listeners how they can find out more about the march, so I wonder if you'd repeat that before we say goodbye to you.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes, there's a Facebook page. You can register at Global March for Lions-Melbourne. And for more information, there's thecannedlion.org, or you can always come to our Facebook page, which is For the Love of Wildlife.
Okay, good luck.
Lovely.
Good
Thank
luck with
you,
the march.
Donalea.
Thank you for giving us your time, Donalea.
Oh, it's lovely. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Our pleasure. Donalea Patman, President of For Love of Wildlife and organiser of Melbourne's Global March for Lions.
Hi, I'm John Benton, actor from The Castle and a stack of other television, film and radio roles. On March the 15th, I'll be joining thousands of people from all over the world in the Global March for Lions. Wild lions are nearing extinction in Africa. Due to canned hunting, the majority of those remaining are being captively bred on farms to be hunted and shot by wealthy, thrill-seeking foreign trophy hunters. United together worldwide, we can be a voice for the lions and end canned hunting.
Global March for Lions. Melbourne 12 noon March 15. Parliament House to City Square. Global March for Lions. Proudly supported by voiceoversforcharity.com.